Hello and welcome. My name is Larry Jackson, and this session of Hanover Architectural Products, Let's Get Technical, is going to deal with bevels. Um, the topic is actually to bevel or not to bevel. It is your choice. Unfortunately, because of the time frame here, we're not going to take any questions during the presentation, but we have an email address here that you can contact. Send your questions to at letsgettech@hanoverpavers.com. And we'll give you that email again at the end of our session here that you can contact us for questions. The 32 years that I've been in business with Hanover, I've seen a lot of different trends come and go, colors, shapes, different textures. But one of the newest thing out there is a non-beveled edge, or sometimes you'll refer to it as a square edge. And what we're hoping to do today to help you out is to give you a little knowledge, a little background of the characteristics of using a beveled paver as opposed to a non-beveled paver. And I think it's important to talk a little bit about the history of pavers and how they've changed over the years. Archaeologists have found that more than 5,000 years ago, the Egyptians used large sandstone pavers to get to their pyramids. But the smaller cobblestones that you're used to seeing today originated in Rome about 312 BC. And one of the most infamous projects over there is called the Appian Way. And I was fortunate enough to visit the Appian Way back about 3 years ago when I was on vacation. And the units that was installed over 1,700 years ago are still working. They're still performing just the way that they were intended. But I don't think at that point the people that put the roads in or the pavers in were too worried about aesthetics such as bevels. Now, it wasn't until the early 1800s that paving systems were introduced here in the United States. Belgian block was first brought over as ballast on ships, and they arrived in New York, and they would take the ballast off and take other goods back to Europe. But the ballast then was used for paving areas. And with that said, it was about 1870 when the first paved street in Charleston, West Virginia, that was completed. So, and I'm showing you this slide, and this photograph that shows you, the picture on the left shows you, of course, just granite cobbles, pieces of random stone, as compared to the newer trends nowadays. And as you can see, the ones back then didn't have a lot of color, didn't have texture, and they certainly weren't worried about whether the pavers were beveled or whether they were square edged. So, with that being said, we're going to talk about a couple different types of pavers that we manufacture. And of course, Hanover, if you're familiar with us, you know that we make a very large range of pavers, from both pedestrian to vehicular. And what I'm going to talk about today in the first part of this presentation is the slab pavers that you see right here. Now, we're showing a beveled edge, which is on this particular unit, as opposed to a non-beveled edge or a square edge. And you can see the difference. There's really no structural advantage of using one over the other. It is purely aesthetics. It's what you want to see in a paver and how it looks. One thing I can tell you for sure, that if you do use a square-edged paver, they're more susceptible to chipping and having the edges chipped off than what the beveled units are. We put the bevels on our pavers to protect the corners because both in transportation, also in installation, and even after the product is down, you got to worry about those edges chipping. So it's purely an aesthetic thing. And I have a paver here that I showed you, that I'm going to show you, that has some edges that are chipped, and that is simply because they're more susceptible to that. So if you're thinking of using a square edge unit, you want to understand that your pavers may have a few chips in them over time, as you can see. Now, one of the reasons, even with a beveled paver, that you don't want edge-to-edge contact, of course, is chipping. So we're showing you in this particular illustration a pedestal, which you see right here, and I got a sample of one here, and the pedestals all have lugs on them. And the lug serves two purposes. This is typically for a roof application, but allows water to flow between it, and it also keeps the paver edges from touching. Because again, even with a beveled edge paver, if you have edge-to-edge contact and you got movement, you're going to have some issues. Most of the time I'm seeing people using square edge pavers on roof decks is when you're installing it on institutions like nursing homes and hospitals. They're worried about walkers and wheelchairs. But one of the things that always comes up when you're putting a square edged paver on a pedestal system, and you talk to any contractor, it's much harder to install a square edge paver and get it level on a pedestal system than it is a beveled unit. It's just much easier. And also, it's much easier to see lippage from paver to paver with a square edge paver as opposed to a beveled paver. Typically, the lippage difference between one paver to another for ADA compliance is 1/4 of an inch. So as you can well understand, that if it's 1/4 of an inch lippage, it can become a stumbling hazard or a tripping hazard, as well as an aesthetic issue. So that's some of the things to keep in mind when you're looking at these units as well. But now, if you're taking these same pavers and installing them on grade, you also want to make sure, even beveled or non-beveled, that you don't put them hand tight. You don't have edge-to-edge contact because of damaging the corners or the edges of the paver. So for illustration purposes, I'm using these little spacer tees that you see here in between the units. You can put those in between on grade. And after you get it installed, you sweep sand in the joints. And when you're done, you take these out and you finish sweeping sand in the joints. And that way, you don't have to really worry about any edge-to-edge contact between the units. And that's very important in this type of application. Now, going from the slab pavers like you see here, we also have interlocking pavers, which are the smaller size. And as you can see, the unit on the right is a square-edged unit, while the unit on the left has a bevel on it. The difference between these units and the larger pavers that we just spoke about is spacer lugs. And they're very important to keep the pavers separated. The spacer lugs on these units are intended to keep the pavers apart 1/16 of an inch, and to get sand into the joints, so you don't have any edge-to-edge contact, and plus it creates a better interlock. So it's kind of built in. You don't have to worry about the spacing like you do when you're on a roof deck or on grade with the larger units. One of the things you got to consider too with square edge units in vehicular applications, again, you're going to get more chipping, maybe corners broken off of them. So what we have available for you also, if you like to see that style of product, we also have units like this. It's a chiseled paver. What we do is take a square edge unit and we chisel the edges to make it look like it's worn, the same way with our tumbled material, which we put in a tumbler and we tumble it to chip the edges as well. So there are certain applications where you want that look, and we have this available for you also. So there's also products that Hanover produces as well as handles that do not have bevels. They're not available in a beveled unit. And one being our asphalt paver that you see here. The asphalt pavers have been around for 100 years. And one of the characteristics of this product is the edges do become chipped after they're installed. We also have our granite pavers, which you see over here. The granite pavers all come in square edge, as well as our porcelain pavers as well. So overall, if you asked us our opinion, Hanover will suggest to use a beveled paver to protect the edges so that the product will perform much better, a little cleaner for you over a long period of time. But we also have these non-beveled units as well. So I hope I gave you a little bit of understanding and knowing the difference between the beveled units and the non-beveled pavers. If you have any questions, if you'd like to actually see some samples, we can send them to you. Just shoot us an email at this email address right here, letsgettech@hanoverpavers.com, and we'll get you those samples or answer your questions that you send in to us. So I hope you enjoyed this and you learned something from it. Our next session will be with my colleague Jason Magliore, and his session is going to be on the importance of sampling. So thanks for joining us at Let's Get Technical, and we appreciate you being here. Have a good day.